We believe health is the foundation that unlocks freedom. The freedom to live fully, to be an asset and not a burden, and to chase what truly matters. Through daily practices and proven frameworks, we are here to help you build deep health, find lasting peace, and live with your heart on fire. Welcome to the chase. Welcome back to the show. Thank you so very much for joining us. I am here, as always, with Ben Bergeron. We are joined as well this time around by friend of the show, Chris Irwin. How are you gentlemen doing?
Great.
Yeah, doing great.
Fantastic. For those folks who maybe knew or missed it, Chris, you're a retired Navy SEAL. You're the Navy SEAL Foundation's communications director, and you are the creator of Rare Sense, a project dedicated to the power of the mind and teaching others how to train the mind just like we do our bodies. This is your third visit to the show. Thank you for joining us every single time. For folks who maybe missed them or just want to go back after this conversation, first time we had you on was December 12th. We talked about a concept of yours called the mind killers. So we talked about what they are, as well as we talked about the first of them, oblivion. And then the second time we had you on was January 28th. And we talked about two more mind killers. We talked about storytelling and suppression. And this time around, we're going to talk about the fourth of the mind killers. We're going to talk about fear and their countermeasure, or its countermeasure, openness. I'm excited to get into this. This is a big one. I would love, Chris, if we could start with a reminder as to what the mind killers are. If you can give us the Cliff Notes version of what it is, and then we'll get into this conversation about fear. So first, just a reminder, what are mind killers? Why are they worth focusing on?
So the mind killers are essentially the ways that we as individuals self-sabotage our mental health. And all of my content is based on the premise that mental health is a training modality. It is something that you can train towards fitness. It is not a treatment thing. It's not something that like you're helpless against at all. So just like you guys do everything around how you can train physical fitness, right? Like you can improve your physical health through training and what you eat and sleep and diet, all of that. You can do the same thing with your mental health. And unfortunately, most people are sort of resigned to this idea that they are powerless against it. You end up with some condition like anxiety. Either say, I have anxiety, I have depression, like it's some disease that you caught or something. And it's just not true. These are patterns of behavior that we develop over time, and they can be undeveloped and counteracted. But most people don't know how to do that. They don't even really know what they're doing wrong. And there's no sort of training modality against it. So all of my content is designed around, built around, how do we do that? How do we assess our own level of mental fitness the way you can assess your physical fitness through biomarkers and through strength tests? How much can you lift? How fast can you run a mile? How do we assess it? And then how do we improve it? And can we bucket those things on some levels so that we've got like the same way you've got strength and endurance and flexibility and agility and whatever else. There's 10 of them, right? Like in the CrossFit model, there was 10 of them. I don't remember all of them. But that same idea, like, do we have kind of channels that we can improve? And so the mind killers is identifying the destructive channels, and then the countermeasures are how you then counteract them through various exercises. And so the ones we've already talked about, and this is like your guys' content, like Ben's content, constantly evolving for me, and I think getting more concise and succinct and better. I will say at this point, it's getting to the point where it's pretty well codified, but it started off actually 7 mind killers. I've further reduced it to 5. So I think if you even go back to that first podcast episode we did, I think we were talking about 7. There's other ancillary things that play into it, but they really play into the interplay of the mind killers into the physical side of things and how that works together. And so I kind of removed those and said, yeah, this is the way that this becomes a mind-body construct, not a separate, but the 5 are really all about the mind, like what we do as individuals. Mm-hmm. So the ones we talked about so far were oblivion, which is this inability to have the proper relationship with the chatter, with the sort of bullshit that's always kind of going on in your head, just not recognizing it, not having an appropriate relationship with it. We then move to storytelling, which has to do with how we treat essentially the narratives we build around memories. One of the things that oblivion does is that it pulls you out of the present moment, by and large. That means that you're either going forwards or backwards in time. That can be okay. It's not necessarily bad, but when you're going backwards, typically where it's destructive is we build these narratives around our memories that are unhelpful and unnecessary too. And then we talked about suppression, which sort of brings the emotional component into that. So there's sort of an intellectual piece of that, which is the narrative itself. Like that's just sort of like, what am I telling myself around this? And then we talked about the countermeasure to that, which is reframing. But then there's this emotional piece of it too, where we store this sort of the energetic aspect of that as well. And when we're talking about real traumatic stuff from our past, you have to address both of those things. You have to examine the narrative that you've built around that and figure out a more constructive way to say that. But then you have to deal with the emotional component of it as well. So that's kind of where we've gotten to now. Mm-hmm. And then the last two, fear and stagnation. Fear then goes the other way, which is forward-facing thoughts, right? Like what we think about the future, basically. And it has that emotional component tied into it. And then stagnation has to do with basically our intellectual development. The first four are sort of things that are, I think, almost in the traditional treatment realm of mental health. But a lot of stuff stops there. Meditation is great, but it doesn't really expound on your mental abilities. And that's really what stagnation is all about. Right. The other thing is they do sort of build on one another, right? So like the awareness piece, which is the countermeasure to oblivion of like how you create a third party relationship with your thoughts is kind of the foundation of it. And then that sort of takes you into storytelling and then you sort of wrap into sort of the emotional component. And then fear is sort of both a story and an emotion.
One thing, and I love that you teed it up, and we definitely talked about it a little bit in previous episodes, this idea of a training protocol, for lack of a better way to put it. As we're listening and as we're thinking through each one of these mind killers, is it the right way to think about it being each one of us has a weakness in each one of these mind killers? And it's not about identifying, oh, you know what, oblivion is really my issue, or fear is real, and everything else is okay. But just like in the gym where it's like, I'm a really strong athlete or I'm a really well-conditioned athlete, is it that we want to identify our strengths and weaknesses across these mind killers and say, I'm going to pay more attention to those weaknesses, or I'm going to pay more attention to the ones that I'm strongest at? Like, how do we begin to create a program, quote unquote, such that we can begin to tackle these mind killers as effectively as we can?
Yeah. So once you can kind of understand all of it conceptually, right? You go through all of that content of each mind killer, each kind of basic countermeasure. I start people off with some very basic 10-minute routines that they can do at different times of the day that address everything together in concert, like not all in one go, but it's like, here's a 10-minute routine that does some of this stuff. Here's a 10-minute routine that does kind of this stuff. Because the idea is you're training for life here, right? This isn't like, there's no competition, right? There's no, this is one place where it is a little bit different from physical fitness in that you're not entering some meditation contest or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. You're literally just training for life. So it's like, you're trying to do these things so that you develop better patterns of behaviors so you are mentally fit the rest of the time, right? And look, that's the way it is for physical fitness for a lot of people too, right? You go to the gym 1 hour a day or whatever it is so that you look good naked and you feel better the rest of the time and all of that. And you can play with your kids until you're older or play with your grandkids. So there's kind of things that I think it's good to get the basics under your belt. And then I do think that the awareness piece is something that everybody needs, that you should always go back to. It is the foundational piece of it. And so it's something that it's sort of like any sport. Like this is virtuosity, right? Like you can never get too good at the basics. And I coach soccer with my middle son. And I'm always saying, brilliant on the basics, guys. Like all the step over fancy shit's great, but like you can never pass a ball perfectly. You can never trap a ball perfectly, right? Like you can just, same thing with air squats and that stuff, right? Virtuosity, brilliant on the basics. So it's kind of the same thing there. So I think it's a good idea for people to get some reps under their belt with all of the things and then always go back to that. But then yes, at some point it becomes a bespoke approach where you, through that journey, figure out, you know what, I need the most work on fear. I need the most work on suppression. And that is part of what you should be doing, is like, fear is my biggest mind killer. I know that. It still is. And so that's where I need the most work. And so that's where I've got to pay the most attention, right? And and with the exercises too, what just like anything, you'll figure out is I like some of these more than others, but they're not necessarily the ones I need the most either. So, and you've got to play that balance between those things. Like sometimes it's good to just do the things you want because you're getting something done, but other times you got to be honest with yourself and say, okay, this is what I need the most.
I'm sure we're going to get into the actual fear one, but how did you know that fear is your biggest?
Because it's sort of what started this all for me. Part of it was storytelling as well, but just as I've gone along, the hardest physical side effects that I've had from this are in the fear modality because of the way it manifests itself physically through sort of cognitive decline or cognitive dysfunction, panic attacks, things like that. Once you start knowing your mind, once you start paying attention to the chatter, you see what it's saying, right? And like you can bucket it and go. I remember doing an exercise where it was like writing down things that I was resistant to doing and then putting the why next to it. Like I can't remember where I got this, but it was like these various columns of like this thing, these thoughts that I was having. And it was just the same shit. It was just all anxiety, all fear, all worry, you know what I mean? And so that's just knowing yourself over time for me. Just very clear that that's the issue or the primary thing. That's the thing I have to work the hardest against. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How did you know, because you just said it was also a little bit storytelling. How were you able to figure out that, it's fear that's the first domino and maybe everything else falls after that, but it's really the fear thing that I have to pay the most attention to? Is it to your point, like you've just got to do the reps and eventually after doing enough reps, you'll just keep circling back to, it's this thing?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, for me, it was like when I started kind of going down this destructive path, I didn't know anything I was doing. Like I knew I was fucked up, but I didn't know what I was doing wrong. I didn't know why. So it's taken me over 14, 15 years to really figure all of that out. So like when I can wind the clock back, I can pull the thread and kind of see how that all snowballed on itself. But at the time I didn't know any of that. But they're all, I mean, like it's not these aren't clear lines in the sand. This is the whole thing, right? Like it all kind of, like all the mind killers and the countermeasures to them, yes, they are specific to those, but they work together too. There's overlap here. Like we'll talk about fear and openness, but that kind of leads into curiosity and stagnation, right? And the same way that suppression and the emotional aspect of that molds and kind of like morphs into fear, because fear is also an emotion, right? It's just a different emotion, and we treat it completely different than those other two. And that's why it needs a different, but it's not, but they're also, there's an energy associated with all of those things, right? And so even some of the exercises where we're talking like breathing exercises, it's like they're in this lane, but they kind of overlap a little bit, it's not cut and dry stuff. It's sort of, I always go back to training. It's fucking training.
It's training.
Right?
As you're saying, I'm like, it's the same exact thing.
It's the same thing. It's like, are you working on cardio or strength today? It's like, I don't know. I'm working out, right? It's hey, what do you do to work out? I lift weights. What do you do for cardio? I lift weights faster. Like, I mean,
Yeah. Or even like, if you're like real specifically, right? If you're training, if you want to improve your VO2 max, you don't need to just do VO2 max training, right?
Right.
Lactic threshold training improves your VO2 max training.
Yes.
Like aerobic endurance will improve there's carryover to so many other things.
Yes. 100%.
So Chris, I think we should let's take the dive. Let's go right in. You kind of teed it up really well. Yeah. It's after suppression. This is where the emotions come in. It's where suppression has to do more with past. Fear has more to do with the future. Fear has a lot to do with the emotional side of it. And you kind of tease that openness is the countermeasure to it. You want to take us through the master class of fear?
Yeah. So just going from that last one, right, where we talk about basically sorrow and anger being the two biggies on the suppression front. And the reason why those are together is because they're sort of two sides of the same coin. We tend to fault to one or the other to make up for the other one. And our response is that we push it down, right? We don't allow ourselves to properly process those emotions. And that's the real problem. Fear, on the other hand, that's not the issue. Like, it's not that we don't allow ourselves to process it. It's that we like sort of succumb to it and it runs away with itself. And the reason why it's an issue is fear is our most primal emotion, right? So when we talk about emotions being the way that we energetically process our experiences, and that's what it is. And they're totally natural. It's a reaction. It's something you feel and you don't think about, right? Whether that's something that makes you laugh, makes you cry, makes you angry, or makes you afraid. That reaction, not in your control. Someone jumps out and scares you, boo. That feeling we get, that not in control of that, right? Mm-hmm. That is the emotional reaction. That physiological mechanism for a specific reason. Fear is a survival mechanism. It exists evolutionarily to keep us alive. And it's sort of like, again, this is like lizard brain shit, the oldest emotion we have. And it served a purpose by sending blood to our muscles and like narrowing our field of vision and doing these things to keep us alive, literally physically, right? So it's like the proverbial sort of getting chased by a saber-toothed tiger, whether that actually ever happened or not, I'm not sure. But some kind of threat to our survival, we got to run away. We got
to I had to inform Heather yesterday that saber-toothed tigers don't exist anymore. She's like, what?
She really thought they existed still?
Dude, you'll get caught up on Heather stuff, but yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I don't know
they're
how
gone.
long they've been dead.
I was like,
for,
yep, they're gone. They were dinosaurs
extinct for a long time.
Yeah, they were like a long time. Woolly mammoths.
Yeah.
You know, like
yeah. So, but we feel all those physiological effects, right? And that's a healthy expression of that, and that is your sort of classic fight, flight, or freeze. So it's either it's helping you either fight the threat, run away from the threat, or in some cases actually play dead, which is another a way to kind of. But the whole point is like keep you alive, right? And then once the threat passes, you return to baseline, and this is it's a yin and yang of your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous system. Sympathetic is that arousal component of it. Parasympathetic is the rest and digest, slow down, like a parachute. That's how I always think about it. And that's fine. And sometimes we still need that. Like if we're about to have a head-on collision driving down the road or something and you get that thing, like you need that. It's like heightened senses, boom. But in our modern day and age, we really aren't in much physical danger most of the times, but we trigger that system. And by the way, this is called your limbic system in your brain. And there's contention whether it's really a system or not, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Like people go way down the rabbit hole of like your hippocampus and I don't give a fuck. I can't feel my amygdala or you know what I mean? Like I can't go, oh, let me work. You know what I mean? Like let me flex my amygdala or something. The point is there's a part of your brain that triggers this, right? But we just don't have those physical threats. But we do this to ourselves all the time. And we do it by getting nervous, worrying about things, catastrophizing. And the problem with that is when you do that consistently and habitually, you raise your sort of threat threshold, so to speak. And you're now on this constant level of essentially fear. This is chronic fear, right? It's no difference. We can call it anxiety. We can call it catastrophizing, we can call it hypervigilance, all pieces of the same exact thing. It is fear. And because of that, you literally will feel the physiological effects of that. This is why people get brain fog, or they have chronic fatigue, or they have digestive issues, right? Like your body stops digesting when you're in that state. Not very well anyway, but we don't recognize it. And this is the thing, like I first kind of really thought about this from a veteran's perspective. Like veterans, you would never say, if you said, do you realize you're afraid all the time? They'd be like, no, I'm not. And it's like, well, yeah, you sort of are, you're on this heightened state. You go into restaurants with like your sidearm and you put your back to the wall so that you can assess the threats that might come about. Like living in that I'm constantly in danger thing is super destructive to your body. And the real issue with it is if you snowball it, it can really screw you up. Like I'm talking incapacitate you, like bedridden, can't get out of bed because your body literally shuts down. And this is such a huge component of all these mystery chronic illnesses out there that people don't realize. But even if you're not that bad off, you're not bedridden where you're chronic fatigue syndrome and you can't focus, and I've been there on that, you can still be in this sort of heightened state and not realizing what it's doing to you physiologically. And it's also got all these other downstream effects about the way you interact with people and the way you interact with the world. To me, it's so insidious and so destructive. And that's why I think it's its own mind killer. It has to be, because the way you treat it is completely different too. It's not the way you deal with sorrow and anger at all.
Let's pause to say thanks to a few sponsors, and we'll be right back to the conversation. This show was sponsored by BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/excellence to get 10% off your first month of online therapy. Sometimes the most powerful changes in our lives start with the right question. But asking ourselves those transformative questions isn't always easy. That's where BetterHelp's network of over 30,000 licensed therapists come in. They're experts at asking the right kinds of questions that open up new possibilities and perspectives. These professionals help you explore areas of your life you might never have considered on your own. Write your story with BetterHelp. That's better, H-E-L-P, by visiting betterhelp.com/excellence to get 10% off your first month of online therapy. We're brought to you by the Defender, the modern adventurer's vehicle that seamlessly blends rugged capability with cutting-edge technology. Visit LandRoverUSA.com to explore the full Defender lineup and find your perfect match. Imagine having eyes everywhere, above, below, and all around your vehicle. That's exactly what you get with the Defender's revolutionary 3D surround cameras and clear sight ground view technology, letting you see underneath your vehicle to navigate any obstacle with confidence. The next generation Pivi Pro infotainment system transforms every single journey, whether you're exploring the city or venturing off the beaten path. With three distinct models, the nimble Defender 90, the versatile 110, and the spacious 130 with seating for up to 8 people, there's a Defender perfect for every explorer. Experience luxury appointments throughout, ensuring you adventure in absolute comfort. Head to LandRoverUSA.com to explore the full Defender lineup and discover your next adventure companion. Okay, now let's get back to the show.
Yeah, I think of all of them, this might have the most, and probably because it's the most tightly tied to emotional, which means that it's going to affect your body.
Yes.
I think you're spot on calling out the fact that this high level of chronic anxiety, stress, whatever you want to, has real downstream biological effects.
Yes,
and
it really
I want
does.
to highlight, really, because you said it, but the undiagnosed piece of this is massive.
Yep.
You highlighted that when your body is in a chronic state of stress or acute stress, it downregulates your digestion. It also downregulates your immune system. And if your immune system is downregulated and you're exposed to a certain pathogen, toxin, or you have cancers in your body at all times, if this is the default state, you don't have the ability to fight those things off the way you would if you were managing this more in a more productive, healthy way.
Yep.
So you hear these stories of, yeah, but she was so healthy. She ate so well. She went to the gym all the time. She was such a high achiever. Like, she had it all. Like, she just like was go all the time. And then you go like, yeah, tell me about her stress levels. And this is where, you know, our reactive medical state hasn't kind of quite caught up to this aspect of how meaningful this is on it. Yes, it can make you bedridden, as you said, from this fear of like, I don't want to leave the bed. It could be this fear type thing of a veteran walking into a public place and back to the wall and searching for an attack. But I just want to, because I think the importance of what you said cannot be understated. And I think it'll be part of the more mainstream conversation in 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
But for right now, I want people to just kind of like understand how real this is. Every cell on your body is trying to figure out if it should be acting in one of two ways. Should it be on high alert? If you're in a chronic overstress state, it's high alert. Or Should I be in repair mode? Should I be building the systems? And those are binary. It's a light switch. One is, as you said, car's going to cut you off and you feel that shock, that like, that's awesome. That's so amazing. You become a superhero for a blink. But if we're in that all the time, man, it's so, so dang destructive.
Yeah. And there's a couple things you said there that I want to kind of dovetail on. One is stress is the same thing, right? It's another way to say that. And, right. So you can say stress, you can say hypervigilance, you can say anxiety. You can say, I like to wind it all the way back to fear, because that is like at its very, very core, that's what it is. Right. And the other things are just like offshoots of this like very, very, very core thing that every animal on the planet feels, right? Not just us. The other thing is the difference between acute and chronic, right? Acute stress, great. That's a workout. A workout is acute stress. Awesome, right? Really good for us. It is the chronic piece of this where you're just never down from that. The other thing I want to clarify too is the bedridden stuff. It's not like I'm afraid I don't want to get out of bed like a agoraphobic kind of person. It is literally you cannot get out of bed. I mean, you're so debilitated. And I'm like, this is one thing where people who have never been in these circles, these chronic illness circles, or have never gone through this themselves, it's hard to believe. But I'm telling you, you can wind this system up so badly that you just can't function. Physically cannot function. Like you're so tired. The room spins around you at 100% of the time. And I've experienced all of this personally, and it's such a highlighting, it highlights to me in such a strong way the interplay between mind and body. Like nowhere else is it clearer that this is a holistic thing we're talking about, not one or the other.
I remember hearing Tony Robbins once say that stress is the achiever's word for fear. I bring that up because it strikes me that everything that you just said, Chris, it's like, whether it's anxiety, whether it's stress, we don't ever want to use the word fear, even if, to your point, when you really get down to it, that's the right emotion. That's the right word to describe the reaction that you're having, that we're having, that we have when it does afflict us. Why do you think we are so hesitant? You mentioned it before, the soldiers you've worked with, pointing out like you're in a fear state. Why don't we ever that's actually very helpful to me, listening to you talk, being able to identify it in my own head, in my own experience, saying, oh, I used to think that might've been depression. I used to think that might've just been me being an anxious person, but really it was fear. And that's actually really clarifying. So why is it so hard for us to be able to label the thing as what it is?
Because of stigma around these words, right? Fear is a weakness. That's how we typically think of it. The same way we think of like crying as a weakness. It's like it makes us uncomfortable because of the stigma around it. So if you tell someone you're afraid, it's like you're a pussy or something like that, right? That's how, especially bravado, macho, alpha type dudes and women as well, I suppose. Like it's like, no, fuck that. I'm not afraid, right? And I think it really just boils down to that, But that's why I think it's so important to talk about it's a biological thing. It's biological, And here's the thing: as we get in, let's kind of go into the countermeasure piece of this, because it speaks to this point, which is, I think most people figuring this out, for me, this countermeasure to this specifically, took a long time. Because, like I said, this was the hardest one for me, and still is. Again, like you never win this game. You get better, but I have to go back to these tools. And it happened to me this morning, actually, where I had a little thing going on with me that was like making me dizzy, and like I could just feel for whatever triggered it. Who knows? Where I had to go back to some tools. I did some visualization. I did some calming stuff to like kind of and like I'm fine right now, But I had to spend a lot of time with it because we come from these circles where we think of the counter to fear as like bravery, like courage, right? When you think of like, whoa,
toughness,
being courageous, no. And the reason that that's not right is because you have to be afraid to be courageous. Like, right? It's like, it's not the opposite. It's something you do in spite of being afraid. If you're not afraid, then you're just psychotic. Like if you're running into gunfire and you're not afraid, you're a psycho. You're not, you know what I mean? You're not brave. Like you're just a psychopath. So that's not it. And that's why I think a lot of people from these lines of work struggle with it so much, is because they're used to that. They're brave. Cops are brave. Firefighters are brave. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Right. But they're hypervigilant. They're living in this chronic fear state because they don't have an actual counter to this. And so I was kind of going down the road of this, and I learned this through these various like neural retraining things where you sort of unwind. You have to like reprogram your subconscious, because it becomes subconscious. That's the thing, right? It's like your body just goes, okay, cool. This is what we're doing all the time, right? This is where we live now. And so you have to consciously overwrite that with things. And all of those programs basically are about calming your limbic system down, visualizing like a place where you're very relaxed and parasympathetic, and just doing it over and over again to kind of reset this baseline. So I started off with this kind of mindset of like curiosity. Like that's the kind of counter, is like, because certainly becoming interested in your thoughts and everything is part of it. But there's sort of like there's an underlying like modality to even that. And curiosity kind of goes into that stagnation piece. And it's this openness. I had a guy I was working with some detox stuff, and he's a very intuitive guy. And he would say to me, dude, you need to be more vulnerable. Like you have this like shell around you all the time. And I totally didn't know what he meant for the longest time. I was like, what do you mean I'm vulnerable? I like cry on Instagram and stuff like that. Not what he was saying. It's this willingness to be like harmed almost. It's this like you have to feel safe. And the way you feel safe is by being open. It's very hard to describe in a way. But if you think about like a turtle protects itself it's got a big shell, and it protects itself by hiding in the shell, right? And that's what you're like when you're in that state. Like your subconscious is shelled. It's armored, and that's what so many people are now. It's just, I've got armor on at all times to protect myself from what other people say, from what might happen, from the news, from people that talk bad about me on Instagram. And you have to like it's like just like take the armor off, right? And like I like that analogy because it really works with people that are in those like military, special operations, firefighters. You have a uniform that you literally put on to go into battle. We put on body armor, we put on helmets, firefight protective equipment, all this shit. But when you're done and you get back to the base or whatever, like the fire station, you take all that shit off. But we don't take the emotional part of that off. We then still live in it, and we go back to like doom scrolling on social media and watching news that just makes us like, oh my God, I should be worried about that. You have to do the same thing. And so, yeah, you have to open that up. And there's ways to do that physiologically, and there's ways to do it sort of intellectually and emotionally too.
What are those? What is the difference between what is an example of physical?
So physical would be certain breathing techniques. So there's things like box breathing, which is like people generally know about. There's resonance breathing, which can actually increase your HRV. It's Leah Lagos's method. It's a 4-second inhale, 6-second exhale. But those things actually make you more physiologically resilient to something that's upcoming, right? So that's just a way to sort of make it so your nervous system reacts better in that moment. So those are like physiological breathing exercises, right? Then outside of that, there's sort of intellectual things you can do. So one is, I talked about the statement of gratitude last time with sort of storytelling. Statement of intent is the other side of that, which is like, I intend to approach the day with this kind of attitude. Right? Statement of gratitude is kind of a way to reframe the past and any bullshit you might be thinking about, something that happened to you in the past. Statement of intent is a way to reframe the kind of future and always think about it in sort of like this open mentality. There's things like Tim Ferriss has got this thing called fear setting, which I sort of lammed onto a little bit and sort of expanded. But the idea is really writing down things where you think this way, things you worry about, things you catastrophize, like getting very detailed about the thoughts that take you down this road. He's got a thing where it's sort of like, okay, what are the measures I could do to mitigate that? And some other things. What I think is really important is writing down those things. Okay, if this happened, I would react in this way. But tracking what actually happens, I think, is so important, because 99% of the things we think are going to go sideways do not. And the more you track that, the more you sort of go, none of this shit that I worry about ever happens. Like, so why am I worrying about this crap? And then there's kind of visualization techniques you can do. And Ben, I know you do this with athletes, where it's not only visualizing something in sort of a positive light, but then visualizing it like, hey, it doesn't go exactly the way I wanted, but how am I going to react in that scenario, right? Because the reaction, again, is what's so important here. It's just like the other emotions going the other way. It's like feeling sad, feeling angry, not a problem. How we respond to that reaction is what's important here. So the response to that fear is so important. And that's the snowball piece of this is so critical too, because what happens with people like me is your brain actually will view the things you're feeling physically as additional threats. So once you start getting like panic attacks, right? Or dizziness or whatever, your limbic system now goes, that's a threat. Like, we need to be worried about that. So what does that do? That just reinforces this loop that and you get in this loop that just gets worse and worse and worse. And so you have to like train yourself to react in a different way. I gave a talk a couple of years ago, and afterwards there was a woman who we were like at a friend's house, and we were having dinner, and she said, she was talking about panic attacks. She's like, I get panic attacks, and my husband just has to hold me and blah, blah, blah. And I said, I just took a yellow sticky and I wrote, so what, on it. And I gave it to her, and I'm like, next time you get a panic attack, look at that and take that attitude. Like, so what, right? Because what you're doing right now is you are making this panic attack just come back at some point in the future because you're afraid of it. Like, you're resisting against it. And I haven't brought up that word yet, but the resistance is the issue in most of these cases. Because again, that's that like shell thing. It's like I'm pushing against it instead of just kind of letting it be. And it's a really hard thing to do for most people. It's still hard for me sometimes. But if you can just be like, okay, so panic attack. Okay, so what? A panic attack is not going to kill me. No one's ever died from a panic attack, as far as I know. If someone out there is like, yes, they have, okay. But like, it's just not going to do anything to you, really. It's just the way you feel. And anyway, she got back to me. She was just like, this is like life altering, like this attitude. And I've had that happen to me. I was sitting in a terminal in an airport, and anyone who's never had a panic attack, it's not like, because again, you've reprogrammed your brain, so to speak, to do this. There doesn't have to be some proximate cause. It's not like you have to have a thought that's like, I'm worried about something. It'll just hit you for seemingly no reason. And this happened to me. I was about to get on an airplane, and it was just like the what it feels like to get a panic attack. It's just like all of a sudden. And I just sat there and closed my eyes and was like, okay, whatever. Like, do your worst, you know? And it's sort of like a bully. Like, bullies like it when you fight back, you know? That's what gets them off. It's like, I'm beating you up, and the more you scream and wail, like, that's what I like. But if you just go, whatever, like, do whatever you want, like, the bully gets bored. It's not fun anymore. And it's sort of the same thing here. And that's that openness.
Let's pause to say thanks to a few sponsors, and we'll be right back to the conversation. We're sponsored this time around by Element, the sugar-free electrolyte drink mix that's perfect for keto and low-carb lifestyles. Visit drinkelement.com/excellence to learn more and get your hands on some for yourself. If you're following a low-carb or keto diet, you might be experiencing headaches, fatigue, or the dreaded keto flu. Here's what most people don't know. When you cut carbs, your body actually needs more electrolytes, especially sodium. Element was specifically formulated to give you the right balance of electrolytes without any sugar or artificial sweeteners. Get your free Element sample pack now when you purchase any of their products at drinkelement.com/excellence. It's a great way to taste the entire rainbow of Element flavors. That's drinkelement, the letters LMNT.com/excellence. We're sponsored today by Helix Sleep, and I'm excited to share some fascinating sleep science with you, my friends. Head to helixsleep.com/excellence today to get 20% off site-wide during their spring savings event. In a recent Wesper sleep study, people who switched to a Helix mattress saw incredible improvements in their sleep patterns. We're talking about 82% of participants experiencing increased deep sleep cycles with an average of 25 more minutes of deep sleep every single night. But here's what's really caught my attention. Participants averaged 39 more minutes of overall sleep every night they were on a Helix mattress. Those aren't just numbers. They represent real improvements in recovery, mental clarity, and daily energy levels. I've experienced these benefits firsthand since getting my Helix, and the personalization process ensures that you get the perfect mattress for your specific needs. Visit helixsleep.com/excellence and get 20% off everything during their spring savings event. That's Helix Sleep, HELIX.com/excellence. Get that 20% off today. Okay, now let's get back to the show. When you were in that, when you're in the airport, or if somebody's out there, they feel a panic attack coming on, or whatever it might be, the physical manifestation of it. How do you start to move? So how do you, what's the first thing we should do in that scenario when we could try to resist against it? And to your point, that just makes it worse.
Yeah.
Is it the shoulder shrug? Is that literally the first thing we should do? Oh, okay, I guess I guess we're going through that now. Is that literally the first reaction we should have once we have the awareness of, oh, it's happening?
Yep. Yes, okay. It is. You have to cut the circuit, so to speak. You have to change the loop. And if you just go into the same pattern, you're just folding it back on itself. Mm-hmm. So the second you go, okay, cool, no problem, I can feel this again. Mm-hmm. It's this openness. It's I'm okay with this. I can feel this right now, and I'm not going to be bothered by it. Now, here's the thing. For most people, it's not going to solve the problem immediately. Mm-hmm. Your panic attack might just go on. It probably will, exactly the way it's always done before. But the more you do that, eventually it won't happen to you anymore. Or if it does, it's infrequent and you just go back to the same thing. So this is kind of what happened to me this morning. It was I had this little, I don't know why, sometimes I still get these sort of panic, it's hard to describe. It's like a panic stab kind of thing, because I haven't completely trained my way out of this. But what I did was I did a little neural retraining thing where I get up and I and I talk out loud too. And this gets into the kind of, for people that are really in a bad way here, these neural retraining systems, Annie Hopper's got one, Ashok Gupta's got one, Ben Aarons has one. Ben's is my favorite, Reorigin. They have full-on programs to retrain your brain where you spend 3-6 months kind of doing this every single day to eventually kind of get yourself so you don't feel this way anymore. I just went back to that practice where I'm talking out loud. I'm sort of saying to myself, this is nothing to worry about. Limbic system, thanks a lot. Appreciate the warning here, but there's no danger. And it's weird, right? It sounds weird, but it works. And now it'll work almost not instantaneously for me, but it happens a lot faster and things happen less frequently, which is, again, just like physical training, right? It's the same kind of thing. Eventually it's okay, I feel much better all the time. I don't feel awesome every single day. I don't have the best workout, but it's a lot more frequent. So yeah, that is it. You just have to show up and do it again the next time and do it again the next time. And eventually it will dissipate. I can't remember the last time I had a full-blown panic attack. Mm-hmm. Doesn't happen anymore.
Is that a similar workflow exercise for kind of these downstream effects of, that's a massive fear, that's a panic attack. But people that have, we were talking about earlier, low levels of anxiety, they're stressed out at work, right? Mm-hmm. There's just too much going on. They feel like they're never getting caught up, and they just always have this chronic level of stress or anxiety that can't kind of get worked through. I understand that the level of openness to like, when this happens, I'm not going to be the turtle that goes back into the shell. I'm going to go out there and experience the storm. I'm going to let this pass all the way through me. For people that are, and maybe it's because it's harder to point at it because it's such a lower level, right? Like I just got a lot going on. Like I got a real lot going, and I can't. So my countermeasure is scotch and Netflix at the end of the night, right? Like that's the thing that, what is the openness of that? And I don't, you never done that? Scotch and a Netflix? It's like, what is the way for the open version of the lower level?
I would say on that, because you're right, there's plenty of people where they're not physically. Now I will say they probably are a little bit. They don't feel it to that degree, but it's like, I'm just tired. I get tired a lot, and I just don't feel like 100%, right? Like they do live in sort of a little bit of a low grade fever kind of version of this, but it's like it's the sort of realization of what's triggering all that. So it goes back to sort of, what are you thinking? Goes back to just kind of like knowing your mind. What are you thinking that makes you do that all the time? Like you're stressed out about what? Like what's the chatter saying that's making you all stressed out? Like, and
I'm trying to, like, I think it's the common thing for mine. So what if the answer was, I just got so much going on. I feel like I'm so behind at work. I don't know how I'm going to get caught up. I have the kids. I have to make dinner. I have the carpool. I have these 6 loads of laundry. I'm not going to get caught up. I don't know when this ends. I don't feel like this is going to end anytime soon. This is my life. I don't like it.
Yep. So in those circumstances, and by the way, I think most people have some level of that too. Most of it is self-imposed. Most of it is not exactly true. And this is something I had to kind of come to grips with too, is like, I've got all this, like I'm forcing the speed and forcing the sort of urgency of a lot of this shit. Most of this stuff that you think is like super urgent is not. So this is sort of like a consequence tracker. Again, going back to like, okay, something that you want to do. If I don't actually do that today, what's the actual consequence? Right? Like, what is it? Is it that big of a deal? Not usually. This is something that I've tried to kind of incorporate in my own life too. I don't have to create stress where it doesn't actually exist. Like I get it, we have responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, but you can slow that shit down too in a way that
What if somebody says, no, Chris, I can't. I do have to pick up these 3 kids. I do have a dog that needs to go to the vet. I do have this project that's due at work tomorrow. My coworker dropped the ball because they were sick for the last 10 days. These are urgent, real things that do need to get done tomorrow. Otherwise, my kid has to spend the night in the park because he didn't get picked up from soccer. Like, what? What about like?
I think to me that is just some of that is just a story. Yeah. Again, do I have responsibilities? Yeah. But the way I act about them is not required. I don't have to stress about that. I can just be like, okay, I got this thing to do. Now I got this thing to do. Now oh my God, the world's going to fucking end if I don't, that component of it is just a story. It really is. Like all 3 of us are busy people, guaranteed. Got a lot going on every day. But I can tell you my stress level, so to speak, of where it used to be versus now is completely different. It has nothing to do with what I'm doing. It has everything to do with my attitude towards doing those things and just being like, okay, here's the thing I got to do right now. I'm going to single task it. I'm not going to get distracted by other things, and I'm going to do it deliberately too. Like the speed component, I think, is a lot of times just fabricated. It really is, and look, it's not a perfect thing either. People do have busy lives, but the attitude you take towards that is completely within your control. It just is, It's not that you say this too, Ben. It's doesn't mean everything's sunshine rainbows all the time, right? Like being a realist is important, right? It's not that. It's not like, oh, everything's amazing and everything's always wonderful and it's sunshine rainbows. But it's just like accepting the reality of like, okay, I got this stuff to do today. Yep. I'm going to chip away at it. And if something doesn't get done and I, for some reason, I'm really bothered by that. Okay. Well, maybe just write out real quick, like, okay, what is the actual consequence of that? Mm-hmm. Is that a real consequence we need to stress about? Probably not.
I think it's almost like the consequence and then the result of that. So like, okay, if I don't get this project done, what's the consequence of that?
Mm-hmm.
I get fired. Like, okay, then what happens if it's almost like, what's the next thing? Because that would be like, I get fired. Oh, see, Chris, this is real. This is a big deal. This is something I stress about. It's like, okay, if you get fired, what is and I think that's the big thing that we do is, we're so, trying to your earlier point, we put all of these things on. Fear is built into us from an evolutionary survival standpoint. It's a mechanism to keep us alive.
Yep.
And what we'll do is we'll take these things and you get fired. Okay, you get fired. You still live in suburbia with your SUV and it's not life or death. It's that,
right.
Okay, if you get fired, you're going to be unemployed for a little bit. Well, you have a severance package. Okay. So you have a severance package and then you search for another job. And during that time, like it's actually, you're not going to struggle to put food on the table. This is like some people, right? I get this other people, right? If they get fired, it is a much more dire situation. But this is to your point we tend to catastrophize. We tend to, okay, most likely if you don't finish the project, most likely you're not going to get fired. Right. Most likely it is that you're going to have to ask for an extension. You're going to have to do something else. And we don't need to go down this doom loop. And that's what kind of, to your like, I like it, snowballs on top of each other.
Yes. And the point is like, so if you think about things that are going to happen, it's like, stuff's going to happen or it's not. Right. And like you're being afraid of it, worried, it doesn't change those things. That's the big kind of realization, right? So the point is like with that sort of shell versus, you can either go through life where things happen and you're like doing it that way, or the exact same shit can happen and you can be like, hey man, okay, we'll deal with it. If something actually bad happens, if one of these catastrophes actually happens, okay, we'll deal with it. And like, I may even write out some, think about some mitigation measures. But even those scenarios, like people are like, most of these things, I'm going to get fired. No, you're not. Right. Like most of the times when people think that, it's not going to happen.
I like the turtle analogy, right?
Yeah.
It's like, which way do you just want to experience life?
Right.
Do you want to experience life in the shell, not experiencing life? And when you're in the shell, by the way, all these terrible feelings have nowhere to go. Or do you want to get out there and see the thing, experience the thing, walk through the thing, and probably be able to bring a better version of yourself through the thing?
And the things are going to happen either way. And I love the turtle analogy too, because there's the tortoise and the hare story as well. Mm-hmm. So, and the moral of that story is like slow and steady wins the race, right? And so it's like you can either be one of two things. You can either be the turtle that never starts. It's just like, I'm afraid to go. I'm in this shell. Or you can be the turtle that like chill, like mellow goes along and eventually wins the race, right? So which one do you want to be? And that's a choice. Like all of those things, everything on the news, all that bullshit, that stuff's going to happen no matter what. So what's the attitude you want to take towards it? How much do you want to pull that into you internally and have it affect you, right? It's just not helpful.
Yeah, and I think my big takeaway from this conversation is that our default response to whatever it is, the news, the late project, is to try to resist against feeling the feeling that it is eliciting, right? The point isn't to not feel the fear. It's actually the opposite in some way. It's actually to just let it in, recognize it for what it is, let it wash over you in the way that a wave washes over all of us, and then get to the other side of it and say, okay, the thing that that little voice in my head said might happen didn't happen, or did happen and it's not that big a deal. But we can't get to that point if we're spending all of our energy trying to keep the feeling of fear. And again, that word can be stress or anxiety or worry or whatever it might be. but trying to keep that fear at arm's length, which is in fact the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the word resistance. I use that word all the time. It is like, it's the resistance that is the problem, right? Because using the physical thing again, like resistance is really good. Resistance training, right? Like the resistance, like pulling against weights, that's great in acute circumstances, but it's terrible long term. And it's the same thing here. It's like that resistance is that improper response, right? It's the resistance to just life in general around you. It's the resistance to the way you feel internally as a result of it. And like, you have to just let go of that resistance. And you can't do that if you're closed off, because they're synonymous, right? Like resistance is being closed off to all this. It's armored up.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, man.
I really appreciate these conversations. We'll have you on again soon to talk about the final mind killer, which is stagnation. So folks, stay tuned for that. If you want to learn more about Chris and all of this, raresense.com. That's the best place to send people, Chris.
Or chrisirwin.com has links to that too if you want to get a hold of me personally.
Fantastic. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, man.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much for tuning into the show. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening or watching so you do not miss another episode. For more frameworks and daily practices, visit chasingexcellence.email. And don't forget to tap the link in the show notes for today's full listener guide, where we break down the key ideas and provide actionable steps to help you put them into practice. Until next time, keep building health, finding freedom, and living with your heart on fire.